Well, I from a very early point, as a 11, 12-year-old boy, I became an atheist. I felt quite certain about my beliefs. It was like a cultural backwater where I lived. There wasn't even a book in the house. I lived solely with my mother, who was a Russian emigre. My father had left her before I was actually born. And the family were, in a sense, culturally impoverished. I wanted to be a painter in 1947. I was 7 years old. My uncle took me to a football match, and the memory that I have of that game is of coloured fragments moving around and on top of a green rectangle. And although I didn't understand the meaning of the word aesthetics, I did instinctively understand what it meant to me sensationally. It made an enormous impact. And I came home, and I remember clearly spending hours in the following days just arranging coloured objects on the carpet, because of that kind of instinct to make things cohere, juxtapose various colours, tones, and it was sort of interesting. And from that point on, I drew and painted in a very naive, of course, childlike way, but that was how I began to work with painting, and it didn't stop. It just grew in intensity, and that's how I began my odyssey as a painter. I don't honestly believe that the painter ever thinks about, I'm talking about serious painting, I don't think that the painter ever thinks about art when they make serious painting. What they're doing is solving a problem or problems. If it's art, that comes much later. And incidentally, I hate the word art. I don't like the word art. It's so overused. I've used a particular theme in my work for 40 years or so, which is the infamy of religious history. At the same time, I believe that a painting must always move beyond its subject. And so the mechanics of painting is crucial to me. And when you begin the painting, all the subliminal forces of the subject, of course, play only a minor role. You know, they're a subtext to what the painting is essentially about, which is giving form to an idea, finding a way of, well, it's like constructing a building, finding a way to put things together in a certain way, to find that coherency which gives a painting austerity, elegance, balance. Vermeer made a painting in 1671, which is, for me, the greatest painting that's ever been made. And it's a painting of a young woman standing at the virginals. The wonderful thing about that painting is that it has always seemed to me, and I've been looking at it since I was a young student, it seems to me to be an exercise in finding a way to put a series of grey rectangles together, almost as if the pictorial elements in the painting are unnecessary. Well, of course they are. One has to measure the painting in relation to when it was made and what people were interested in at that time and what they were looking for in art. But when I look at the painting, I see I see that wonderful Flemish desire for perfection. It's deeply moving. There is this wonderful thread of insistence on a certain kind of formal structure. When I make paintings, this painting by Vermeer, 1671, is always in my head. The lesson that I have learnt from that painting is about form, how the painting does move beyond its subject, and that crucially, even though in my paintings there are clear subjective references, I'm still essentially involved in how the painting is made, how the forms are put together, how the colour is used. The palette, for instance, is a crucial piece of apparatus towards the making of a painting. A lot of what is going on inside my head is the weight of history of art, what has come before me, my precursors, their achievements. And of course in some ways it's belittling, and you have to fight that. I mean, this is my own personal experience of how it is when, I face up to a canvas. And incidentally, there's also the element of fear. The first time I discovered Bruno was I found a book in Tbilisi. Bruno's book, the Ash Wednesday Supper, where a group of people sit and they talk about the Copernican theory. And Bruno will often mention the seating apparatus. Now, for me, even before I came across Bruno, chairs, benches, any kind of seating apparatus, I've always found interesting. I believe that chairs, they have a kind of pathos, that sense of human presence and of transience, of time passing. And at one point he mentions the bench. I thought that I could use the bench as a kind of metaphor for all kinds of reasons. It it doesn't symbolize anything. It acts as a metaphor for time passing, endurance. It's a place where justice and injustice are administered. People have sat on benches. They sleep on benches. They've given birth on benches. They fuck on benches. It has this wonderful historic value as an object. I wanted also to use the bench as a constant in all of the work, but the primary reason throughout the series was to find a way to make paintings which were successful at their plainest, simplest point. That's always what I was looking for. Like the 1671 painting by Vermeer. I've always been disturbed by gravity. My mother told me once that when I was a small child I would spend a long time in the garden throwing things in the air and getting more and more enraged when they came down. But gravity is a thing I can't quite come to terms with. I know that sounds a little strange, but that's how it is. With the notion of ascension, this is why in the squint paintings, the leper squint paintings, I've added that extra fiction to the work by the idea of ascending the ladder in order to get to the squint. Well, what the viewer would be seeing is an aperture in a wall, a hole in the wall, often supported by some kind of stepladder apparatus with which you can mount the steps to view through the hole. The leper squint was a hole cut by medieval masons, usually diagonally through a stone wall, facing the altar, so that the lepers, the undesirables, could squint through the hole and see the service and hear the service. It's wonderful irony that the people who most needed God were the people who were kept outside. And this is what is so interesting about painting, that you can work and labour at a painting, and simply be laying on the colour, the forms, and at the same time the subliminal nature of the subject matter is finding its way into the painting, or into the atmosphere of the painting, into the nature of the painting, without you even understanding how it happens, because that in turn is a manifestation of who you are, what you are. And that is interesting, that is fascinating. I don't feel powerful at all. I'll tell you what I did feel when I was a younger man. I felt kind of sexy. And I think that was something to do with the sensuality of painting. Well, of course it was. The juiciness of the pigment, the weight of the pigment. It's beautiful stuff. It's not like water-based paint. But you're asking me what I feel, what I felt. What do I feel when I make painting? Well, it's a kind of intriguing question. What does one feel? You feel so many things. One thing I think I can say and underline is that what you tend not to feel is emotion. Or emotion that you are aware of. I think it's a kind of labor, and so what you're doing is you're involved in laying down a kind of craft, which is interesting, isn't it? I mean, I'm sure some people feel so emotional they're kind of dancing up and down and having a great time and screaming and crying. It's not for me. It takes such a long time to find your language. It's taken me a long time, and I still think I'm finding it. But I know that I'm closer to a language which is coherent and recognizably mine. But I've made many, many mistakes along the way, and it's been quite a struggle. I do feel that when you look at a painting, the first thing that you must see is the painting itself, and then the image later. And if that happens, then the painting is halfway to working.